What the study says.
Okay, let's dive in. Have you ever come across the Ig Nobel Prize?
Oh, yeah. They're fantastic, the awards for research that. What's the line?
It's brilliant. First makes people laugh, then makes them think.
Exactly. Love that mission.
And, well, the winner of the 2024 Ig Nobel for Anatomy, it absolutely nails that brief.
Ah, I think I know the one you mean. Is it the Hair Whorl study?
That's the one. We're doing a deep dive into this paper from the Journal of Stomatology Oral and Maxillofacial Surgery.
Right, quite the journal title.
Yeah, bit of a mouthful. But the paper's title is Genetic Determinism and Hemispheric Influence in Hair Whorl Formation.
So hair whorls, a little swirl on top of your head.
Exactly. Seems pretty simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, like, what makes it go clockwise or counterclockwise?
And where it sits on your head, too, it varies.
It does. And
Yeah.
honestly, what determines it? Well, it's been kind of a mystery.
Uh-huh. A fascinating little biological quirk.
So the researchers behind this paper, they really wanted to dig into that. They basically asked two big questions based on the source we looked at.
Okay, what were they?
First, is it genetic? Is your hair whorl direction mainly baked into your DNA?
Makes sense to ask. Nature versus nurture, essentially.
Right. And second, this is the wild part, could environmental factors play a role? Specifically, where you are geographically.
Like northern versus southern hemisphere.
Exactly that. Could that influence your hair swirl?
Wow, okay. That's unexpected. How did they test the genetic part?
Well, they went with the classic approach, twins.
Ah, the go-to for genetic studies.
Yep. They looked at 74 pairs of same-sex twins, all living up in the northern hemisphere.
The logic being, if it's strongly genetic, the twins should match up pretty often, right? Especially identical twins.
Precisely. They share almost all their DNA, so their whorls, particularly the direction, should be similar if genes are the main driver.
And what did they find? Did the twins match?
They did, significantly so. The study found that twin pairs were much more likely to have whorls spinning in the same direction than you'd just expect by, random chance.
Okay, so there's evidence for a genetic component.
Yeah, the stats they ran, things like odds ratios, they pointed pretty clearly towards genetics having a say. It wasn't just a 50-50 thing. Genes seem to push twins towards having the same rotation.
Interesting. So genetics gives a nudge.
But then, this is where it gets really, really interesting, maybe even a bit weird.
The hemisphere part?
The hemisphere part. They shifted focus from twins to the general population, comparing two different groups.
Okay.
They studied 50 kids in Paris, France, northern hemisphere, and 50 kids down in Santiago, Chile, southern hemisphere.
And they just looked at their hair whorls clockwise or counterclockwise?
That's it. And they found this really striking difference.
Don't tell me. It actually differed by hemisphere.
Significantly. Yeah. Counterclockwise whorls were way less common in the kids from France up north compared to the kids from Chile down south. Yeah. The difference wasn't small. It was statistically significant.
Wow. So just being born and living presumably in one hemisphere versus the other seems to correlate with which way your hair swirls?
That's what the data suggests. It's pretty counterintuitive, isn't it?
It really is. Genetics explains some of the family similarity, like in twins, but then there's this broader pattern linked to location.
Yeah. And the researchers, they even touch on this in the paper. They talk about the possibility of links to large-scale physical stuff.
Like what? The Coriolis effect? Water down the drain type thing?
They mentioned those classical experiments, yeah. That they're careful. They state clearly there's no proven direct link between that specific effect and hair whorls.
Right, that would be a huge leap.
A massive leap. But just the idea that something about the hemisphere itself, some large-scale environmental factor, could influence this biological trait. It's fascinating.
It really opens up questions about what those factors could even be.
Absolutely, and that's why this research totally earned its Ig Nobel, Starts with hair swirls, makes you chuckle.
And then suddenly you're thinking about genetics and global physics?
Yeah, exactly. It shows that something so common, so seemingly simple, might be shaped by this dance between your genes and potentially your wider environment.
Nature and nurture, maybe on a planetary scale for this one trait.
Which leads to a really interesting thought for you listening right now. If something like the direction your hair whorls can be influenced by both your DNA and maybe even which half of the Earth you're on, what does that suggest about other parts of our development?
Yeah, especially the less obvious parts, things we don't even notice.
Right. How many other intricate, maybe unseen interactions between our biology and our environment are shaping us constantly.
It makes you realize just how complex things are, even down to the smallest details. A lot to think about from a simple hair whorl.
Definitely makes you think.